trying desperately to communicate.
When The Changeling first showed up in theaters back in 1980, a lot of people walked in expecting just another solid supernatural movie.
The Changeling, an experience beyond total fear.
You know, the type of slow and atmospheric type. The kind that sits with you afterward instead of relying on today's cheap jump scares. And people seem to agree that it delivered on that. But what made it stick out even more was this quiet claim that it was inspired by real events. Of course, not like the exaggerated, based on a true story ones that are marketed that we see nowadays. This one centered on a composer named Russell Hunter, who insisted that a big chunk of what happens on screen came straight out of what he lived through in an old mansion in Denver during the late 1960s. That claim is what turned The Changeling into one of the more interesting cases in supernatural cinema. Not because it was packed with wild spectacle or over-the-top hauntings, but because the original account felt so personal and grounded. It was unsettling in a quiet way that matched the movie's tone perfectly.
Joseph!
Did you die in this house, Joseph? Did you die in this house?
The house most people connect to Hunter's story is the historic Henry Treat Rogers Mansion. It was built in the early 1900s when Denver was really stretching into a city of money and ambition. I always like to think of a classical style with big staircases and high ceilings that could make even ordinary sounds feel distant and echoing. The kind of place that was meant to look permanent and impressive. It sat near Cheeseman Park, and that location already carried its own strange weight. Cheeseman Park used to be a cemetery. When the city decided to turn it into a park, they relocated the graves, but the job was done incompletely. Stories have floated around for decades that not every set of remains got moved properly. That incomplete cleanup left a lingering unease over the whole area long before anyone ever linked paranormal activity to the mansion itself. Over the years, the mansion changed hands and purposes. Private residence at times, later used for organizations and gatherings. Like a lot of big old houses, it had that natural soundtrack of creaking floors, shifting pipes, and acoustics that could make regular sounds feel amplified or out of place. Nothing dramatic on its own, just the usual personality of an aging structure, until Russell Hunter moved in. Hunter was working as a composer and looking for a quiet place where he could focus. At first, the mansion seemed ideal, large, elegant, full of that old world character that can feel inspiring when you're trying to create. Solitude and space. But according to his account, the atmosphere started shifting not long after he settled in. It began subtly, the way these stories often do. He reported hearing unexplained knocking sounds, often happening around the same time each night. These weren't the random creaks or settling noises you'd expect from an old house. They felt patterned, almost intentional. Sometimes the sounds would echo through the walls like something was trying to get a message across. Then came the movement. Objects shifting without explanation, doors opening and closing on their own, small items turning up in different places than where he'd left them. Nothing violent or dramatic at first, just quiet disruptions that slowly started wearing down any sense of normalcy. One of the stranger details involved water. Hunter said he would occasionally discover that a bathtub, unused and in a part of the house he rarely entered, had filled itself during the night. No plumbing issue was ever found that could explain it, and the fact that it kept happening only made the whole thing harder to brush off. As time went on, the activity reportedly stepped up. The knocking sounds evolved into something that felt more like communication. Hunter started experimenting. He'd knock back and ask simple yes or no questions. In response, he believed the sounds answered in a consistent pattern. Whether it was pure coincidence, his mind finding patterns in random noise, or something else entirely, the experience convinced him that whatever was present wasn't just random. The idea of an actual presence became harder and harder to ignore. According to the story, Hunter eventually sought help to try and understand what was going on. That led to one of the most famous elements that later made it into the film, the séance. During the session, it was claimed that a child spirit attempted to communicate, sharing fragments of a tragic backstory connected to the house. The narrative that came out, whether you take it as literal truth or some kind of psychological reconstruction, was that a young boy had died under suspicious circumstances many years earlier. Details shifted depending on the retelling, but the core stayed the same. Something unresolved, something hidden, something that still lingered inside the walls. One particularly eerie piece involved the discovery of a hidden room or some kind of concealed space within the house. Accounts differ on how literal that discovery really was, but the concept became central to the movie. It worked as both a physical find and a metaphor, something buried, waiting to be uncovered. Turning Russell Hunter's experiences into a film didn't happen overnight. For years, the story circulated in smaller circles, picking up attention gradually. Eventually, Hunter worked with writers to shape his account into something that could work on screen. The screenplay went through several versions before becoming the film audiences know today. In the movie, the central character, played by George C. Scott, is a grieving composer who moves into a large, empty mansion after a personal tragedy. The element of grief was pushed hard in the film. It added a psychological layer that blurred the line between what might be happening outside the character and what might be happening inside his own head. Director Peter Medak shaped the tone with real restraint. Instead of leaning on overt horror, The Changeling builds tension through silence, repetition, and atmosphere. The famous sequences, the bouncing ball rolling down the staircase, the empty wheelchair moving on its own, feel like the kind of quiet, persistent disturbances Hunter described. The séance scene is one of the film's most memorable moments and was directly inspired by the reported attempt to communicate with whatever was in the house. In the movie, it becomes a turning point, shifting everything from uncertainty into something more defined and personal. The mansion tied to Hunter's story is often associated with the Henry Treat Rogers place, though that connection has been debated. Some accounts treat it as the actual location. Others suggest it simply resembles the type of house he described. Either way, the idea of the house itself remains central. Large, echoing, full of history, it becomes more than just a setting. It turns into a character that holds memory, secrecy, and unresolved trauma inside its walls. Unlike the Amityville house, which turned into a full media spectacle, the mansion connected to the Changeling has stayed relatively quiet. There haven't been widely accepted ongoing reports of paranormal activity tied to it in modern times. Most of its reputation comes specifically from Hunter's account and the film it inspired. The house that inspired The Changeling no longer stands. The Henry Treat Rogers Mansion at 1739 East 13th Avenue, on the edge of Cheeseman Park in Denver, was demolished years after Russell Hunter claimed to have lived there. In its place now sits a modern condominium complex. Unlike many locations tied to famous hauntings, this one never became a tourist stop, a museum, or a commercialized paranormal landmark. The original building is simply gone. Once the story was adapted into the 1980 film, the movie itself grew larger than the physical location. The emotional and psychological weight of The Changeling shifted attention away from the Denver house and towards the experience of the haunting. As with most cases labeled based on a true story, the events remain open to interpretation. Skeptics point out that much of what Hunter described could be explained by natural causes: old house acoustics, plumbing quirks, structural settling, or the power of suggestion under stress. The patterned knocking, for example, might have been nothing more than the building expanding and contracting. Others find the consistency and personal detail in Hunter's account harder to dismiss completely. The gradual escalation, the attempts at communication, and the emotional impact give the story a quiet intensity that feels lived in rather than invented for attention. What makes the case especially compelling is its tone. Unlike more sensational hauntings packed with dramatic confrontations, Hunter's story is persistent and almost intimate. It doesn't rely on shock. It builds unease through repetition and subtlety, the exact same qualities that define the film. More than 4 decades after its release, The Changeling remains one of the most respected supernatural films ever made. You can see its influence in countless later works that favor atmosphere over spectacle. The idea of a haunted house as a place of memory, rather than simply a site of fear, has become a defining element in a lot of modern horror. The film's approach, grounded, restrained, and emotionally driven, set it apart from many of its contemporaries at the time. At its core, the story isn't just about a haunting. It's about loss, isolation, and the lingering presence of unresolved past events. Whether you interpret those events as supernatural or psychological, they carry a weight that feels real, and maybe that's why the story continues to endure. Even if the exact details of Russell Hunter's experience remain uncertain, the feeling it leaves behind, the sense that something unseen might be trying to reach out from just beyond what we can fully understand, doesn't require absolute proof to be effective. The inspiration behind The Changeling exists in that uneasy space between documented experience and personal interpretation. Russell Hunter's time in a Denver mansion, filled with unexplained sounds, shifting objects, and attempts at communication, became the foundation for a film that helped redefine quiet horror. The house itself is long gone, replaced by ordinary condominiums that offer no answers one way or the other. But maybe that's fitting, because the story of The Changeling was never really just about proving whether something happened. It was about capturing the feeling of living with the unknown, of hearing something in the silence and wondering if it's just the house settling or something trying to be heard.